The ancients called their civilization Kemet. And actually, that's a later derivation. The real term was Khem. And it's even in existence today because the Egyptians, one of their terms, the Arabic term for Egypt is Al-Khem. And does that name sound familiar? Alchemy. That's where alchemy comes from. It's the arts and sciences of ancient Kemet. So Kemet is the word. It meant black land. Now people will ask me, well, what does that mean? Well, basically, this civilization was always based on a river, the Nile. Now, not the Nile as she is today, as we're going to discuss briefly. Again, in my book is more detail. The ancient civilization I'm talking about had an ancient river, which we call the Nile, which was named by a German researcher named Blankenhorn in the early 20th century, which was where it's all Western desert today. But this river was huge. It was 100 miles across, thousands of miles long. All of Northern Africa at one time was all lush and green with this great river with tributaries. The desert as it is today is less than 10,000 years old. So this civilization was pre-desert. So it was based on this ancient river, the Nile, the Nile, which is Western desert. And the word means a black land. It's the alluvial, dark, rich soil that the river deposits when she floods. And that was the basis of the civilization. You're going to see a slide I'm going to show you of Egypt, and people are amazed that all this civilization was a thin strip of green land around the river, and the rest was desert. That's dynastic times. But even so, the ancient people called it the black land, meaning the rich soil deposited by the river where they grew their crops, their civilization. So, first thing we say is we don't teach Egyptology. Chris introduces me as an Egyptologist. Well, I'm not. I'm a chematologist. And it's a whole new discipline. So, before you have a framework for what we're going to show you, we also still have to lay a groundwork. And one of the major themes of teaching that my teacher gives to us is the fact of cycles. Now, I'm called a paradigm buster, so is David. And it's an honor to follow David in presentation because I consider him not only a friend, my publisher, but perhaps one of the great diffusionist researchers that's ever lived. And his presentation showed that, how he's able to pull things from all areas of the world which he has seen, he has been, to show the similarities. And we are diffusionists, no doubt about it. So my teacher has given us what are called the 5 stages of the sun. And let's do that, because this is a very important teaching that forms the basis of what we're talking about. Now this is kind of different than you heard before, because we're not talking about sun gods. We're talking about teachings that exist before religion. And this is what my second book is about, From Light into Darkness, where I'm going to make a distinct difference between spirituality and religion, and where I state unequivocally that religion is the business that evolved of spirituality. That's why it's darkness. First stage is called Khepr, which we know as the scarab beetle. Everybody likes Egyptian iconography has seen the scarab beetle, also known as the driller. Why is it called the driller? Well, the scarab beetle is an unusual little insect because it takes a bowl of dung, animal waste, rolls it up, and then deposits its eggs in the dung. So when the young are born, they immediately have a food supply. So that's why it's called the driller. It also became a symbol. The first stage of the sun is the dawn, when the sun comes up. Because as a great teacher, R.A. Schwaller-de-Lubitsch, who if you've ever heard of John Anthony West, is the greatest proponent of this man's teachings, he made the statement that the Egyptians, Cometians, used the known to evoke the unknown. And what they saw with this little beetle is pushing the ball of dung in front of itself daytime. They said, well, it was like bringing the sun disk at dawn, pushing the sun. So it became a symbol of dawn. That's the first stage. The sun is dawn. The second stage is the famous name we all know of the sun, supposedly Ra. But here we're telling you, according to the indigenous traditions, teachings, Ra is only 1/5 of this understanding of the sun, not a god by itself. But we'll get to that. Ra means the stubborn, often depicted by a ram. In ancient Egypt, even though they had donkeys, they considered the ram to be a real stubborn animal. So that's the symbol of Ra. It represents the sun at noon. And I'm also going to return to what this means. Let's get the 5 stages out first. Third one is called known as the wise. Often depicted as just a mature man, standing on a staff. Next stage, Aten, which is going to be a big aspect in the book I'm writing now. In the book I'm writing now, I'm talking about the last two stages, the stage of Aten and the stage of Amen, which I'll discuss with you. Aten means the wiser. This is like twilight. This is afternoon sun. Twilight. When the sun is at its peak, then starts to come down. And the last stage is known as Amen, written many different ways. And this means the hidden. And this is why we'll get to what we're talking about. And that's night. Now, the interesting thing about these teachings is not only do these represent a daily cycle of 5 stages of the sun, but also represent stages of consciousness in our development and also time periods in history. So that's how these cycles work, and this is why we're talking about continual cycles. In this man's teaching, there is no beginning and there is no end. They don't believe in a Big Bang theory. All they do is talk about cycles in between. There's no time, there's no beginning, there's no end. So Khepr represents a time frame that may go back as much as 65,000 years ago. Ra, again, as a true indigenous teacher, Hakeem doesn't deal in exact dates. He's not interested in quantifying like we are in the modern world with our predominance of left-brain thinking. He's more interested in quality than quantity. So these are only approximations. Perhaps 65,000 years ago, perhaps 50,000 years ago, perhaps 30,000 years ago, perhaps 20,000 years ago. And Amen, we can be more specific, which is about 5,000 years ago. Now, also stages of consciousness. This is the birth of consciousness, where we are born, reborn, to begin the path of consciousness. Ra, why it's called the stubborn, it represents an adolescent stage of consciousness, and we all know, all your parents, and remember when we were teenagers, we think we know everything. And we tend to be a little stubborn as far as learning something new. So that's like the teenage, adolescent stage of consciousness. Un is mature consciousness. When we've gained a little wisdom, we've become wise. And Aten represents the height of consciousness. Sun at its full flowering in the afternoon. We're at the full stage of consciousness. We're hard for people to believe, but in the stage of Aten, we're all enlightened. And Amen represents the fall. And every myth, Acharya talked this morning about the links of all mythologies around the world. Every mythology talks about a fall from the golden age, a fall from grace. Amen represents that. We're going into darkness, hidden. Everything is night, darkness. And folks, that's where we are now. Here's a different aspect of this teaching. We are in the darkest stage of these 5 cycles for the last 5,000 years. Even with I always like to use the expression John Anthony West used, and it's a great quote. We think we're so evolved today with our striped toothpaste and our hydrogen bomb. And that dates us, because teenagers don't know what striped toothpaste is anymore, going back to the 60s, but we're actually in the lowest stage of consciousness, and we're coming out. The reason for these teachings, the reason we're bringing this out, the reason why he has been given permission to bring these teachings to the West, through me and others, I'm not the only one, is that we're coming to a new stage of Khepr now. Just like the Mayan calendar, just like you hear from Native American elders, we just did a great Star Knowledge Conference in Minnesota, where we presented these teachings to Native Americans, and they just ate it up. It was so much in line with their own traditions, their own teachings. We're coming out of this now. And here's another teaching I'd like to give you. Without offending anybody's religious tendencies here. Amen, Amen, Amen in Hebrew, which we all say in Christianity and in Judaism and in Islam in its way, at the end of prayers, we are taught to believe means, so let it be done. Thy will be done, so let it be. Well, actually it means, according to the Commission teachings, so let it be hidden. So let it be in darkness. Think about that.